on TV, online and on your smartphone. This is Ticker News.
This episode of Talk Your Book is proudly brought to you by Honan, providing a complete range of insurance, risk and financial solutions.
Fundies called me up, told me to take a look, but stay stubborn as bulls and talk their own book. Get the money, get the money, get the money.
Hi, I'm Chris Judd and you're watching Talk Your Book, and today we're lucky to be joined by Aaron McDonald and John Poynton from over there in the Wild West. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Chris.
Now, look, it's the first litigation fund that we've had on the show. I thought the best place to start when talking about Hartwell funds would be giving us just an overview of what in fact is litigation funding.
It's where a person who wants to bring a claim in the courts, Chris, who can't afford to fund it themselves by paying lawyers, takes a person called a litigation funder in to effectively buy a stake in the case. So they underwrite the investment in the lawyers, they cover the risk in case the case goes the wrong way. But the quid pro quo is that the market sort of dictates that the funder will take what they've spent, what they've invested, plus sort of 30 to 50% on the way out is sort of the general rule of thumb.
And John, you've been involved in a huge number of businesses over there in the West and around Australia. What drove you to get involved in Hartwell?
Well, without it sounding too moralistic, you see quite often situations where people have been treated really badly by counterparties. So, for instance, they might have, in good faith, done work and then not be paid for it. And then the counterparty takes advantage of their poor financial position, just hold off, knowing that the other side can't afford to take legal action, and it's just unfair. And so that, I got firstly involved in this a while ago in a different company, and we did okay. But essentially, when this opportunity came up, it seemed to me that Aaron and his team were really worth backing. And over here, there are any number of examples of people being treated badly in the way I've just discussed or described, and it seemed to me that, we could both make money, but also, if you like, have an ethical investment here and help people out who needed it.
And Aaron, is it a case-by-case basis that Hartwell operates in, or is it a closed-ended fund, if you like?
Yes, it is a case-by-case, Chris. So there's separate unit trusts being considered on a separate basis for each claim.
And what's sort of the timeline of an average case or an average investment horizon for the investor?
Well, 6 months to sort of 2 years is sort of the general rule of thumb, but it could potentially go longer than that. And the return on the fund usually increases the longer it goes. But where our whole investment philosophy is to target low hanging fruit. I mean, my day job, Chris, is a lawyer, a dispute resolution lawyer. So statistically, 97% of the time, cases resolved by consensus, and 3% of the time cases get to trial. So we're certainly targeting the 97%, not the 3%, but you need to go in there, you need to make the investment on as though you will be one of the 3% because you need to cover off every eventuality.
And what percentage of cases in Australia would have some level of litigation funding involved?
Very few. It's so when you're the defendant in a case, you often don't even know that there is litigation funding involved, although under some of the court rules, the lawyers involved in the case are required to disclose it, and those obligations of disclosure are becoming far greater. But generally speaking, in order for it to be viable, the claim needs to be north of $1 million at the very bare bottom, and some litigation funders won't even let you through the door if your claim isn't north of $15 million. And there needs to be some elements of the transaction or the claim which make it the right appetite for a litigation fund. So it needs to be a defendant with big pockets or an insurance policy behind it. And there needs to be obviously a strong claim. We've obviously seen litigation funding go well into the class action space, which isn't really our business model. We're not really looking to do that with Hartwell. But in the short answer to your question, Chris, is certainly in the bigger claims, it's pretty prevalent in most of those cases.
And you mentioned your preference for cases that end up settling and not going through a full hearing. Once the litigation funding comes on board, does that incentivise the counterparty to settle because they know now the defendant's well funded and likely to see the trial through?
Yes, precisely. So that's right, because once the litigation fund is on board, there's no way that the case is going to capitulate. It's either going to go to trial or it's going to settle. So that's certainly one of the psychological advantages of including a litigation funder in a case.
And it's quite interesting, in other places and other cases, just to see how quickly things move to settlement because of the existence of the funder, which kind of reinforces the fact that, the protagonist, the defendant, if you like, was holding off deliberately because he knew, or they knew, that the counterparty didn't have the funds to take on the case. So just the mere presence of a deeper, pocketed or bigger balance sheet party kind of brings people to the table. It's quite interesting.
And so for investors, John, is Omni Bridgeway sort of a comparable company that they can look at to get an idea for what sort of work Hartwell are doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly, yeah, same sector as Aaron said. Their target or their sort of minimum threshold size transaction or case is much bigger than ours. I followed IMF, which started years ago. Hugh McLernon set that up and did very well and enlisted it, and there's been various iterations. But they've grown over the years and have had a very successful track record. So I think we would like to be compared with them in terms of the overall track record. What we would say is that our case size is smaller, and therefore there's probably a bit of a gap below them over here in particular.
And Aaron, it strikes me as an opportunity that's potentially very much non-correlated to the rest of the economy. Is that how you see it?
Yes, exactly, Chris. It's quite a unique investment class. I mean, I think it would be remiss of me to say it's not a speculative investment, but I think with you measuring the risk and the prospects of the case carefully and getting independent advice about it, you can invest your money wisely in this sector and do well.
Well, I think the other thing is our money's there too.
Go on, John.
I think that's important from an investor's point of view.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yep.
And so it looks, perhaps rather than an investment that's suited to accountants or finance graduates, is it a case where lawyers are going to make the best investors in these sorts of funds because they're better able to see the likely outcome of each case?
I mean, I think it depends upon which lawyer you ask, Chris. I mean, the lawyer that comes to you and says, I've got this great case, but I need to be funded in order to run it, probably has some unconscious bias towards their own case. I mean, in the fund's infancy, myself and another lawyer have been assessing the merits of the cases. But as we get more sophisticated, we're planning on having independent investment committees who are removed from the outcomes of the case, making these decisions for us. Ideally, where cases we've really liked so far is where the lawyers come to us and said, here's a written opinion from a silk who says that the case is viable, and then that really underwrites the investment.
Well, gents, it's certainly a first for Talkie Books. First time we've had a litigation fund on the show, and I certainly know there's a lot of people out there at the minute looking for opportunities that perhaps aren't quite as linked to the economic cycle as previous periods. So thanks so much for walking us through the opportunity.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Good luck with it.
Thank you.